Live. I'm your host, Kalil. Our show is brought to you by Vouri. I have an unhealthy amount of joggers, but Vouri's performance joggers, they take the cake for the softest, most comfortable. Make sure to check out our description below for 20% off of your first purchase. Today's episode, we have Brian Friend and Justin LoFranco back. Today, we also have special guest Patrick Vellner, as another athlete has taken to social media to announce a positive drug test. This time, it's Kuwait's Nasser El-Walgay. He's the runner-up at the Far East Throwdown. Vellner, first off, what are your thoughts on what is going on? We're now at 14 positive drug tests just from the season semifinals.
I don't know. It's a good question. I think on how many there were in other years. It's not a great in general. I think as an athlete, but this is kind of like we want better testing and be professional the sport more and more, right? So part of me is really glad people and we want to cut rhetoric that everybody's on. So it's just you make relationships with people, with the public, and so it's hard to not be difficult, but it's the reality of we're getting rid of it more and more, it seems.
I think, is he cutting in and out for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we're not hearing everything, Pat. Maybe we'll have him move locations in the gym real quick. But obviously we talked about this in depth yesterday, Justin, Brian. Is this something that we're still surprised to see? I mean, the past 48 hours, it seems like we've just been scrambling as we hear more and more positive drug tests come up.
Surprised? Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. Surprised yes and surprised no. We are hearing a lot of stuff coming on through the back channels, and we're trying to track down reliable information about what's going on and going right to the source here. And so, yeah, we're kind of working a little bit almost today for maybe what's going to be happening tomorrow. But yeah, I think what's so surprising about this, and I think why there's such a big reaction to this, is number one, that the number 14 is actually quite large. So I look back, I think we were at 11 in 2021, but that was at the conclusion of the CrossFit Games. So now that we're at 14, we haven't done any of the Masters testing that we talked about yesterday on the show last night, which it's not as if it's a giant pool of individuals that don't get tested throughout the season unless they're subjected to directed testing. And so by the end of the season, if you're at 11, which included the games testing and any of the individuals as well as teams, and then Masters age group divisions at the games, 11, okay, that's pretty in line with what we've seen in previous years. We're at 14 and we haven't even gotten to the games yet. Not to say that there's going to be a dozen positive tests at the games, but there are usually a handful of tests that come back positive. And so we're looking at upwards of 20 potentially if a half a dozen are test positive at the games, which is, to my recollection, is the single largest amount that I've seen in the last 4 to 5 years. I think what's surprising about it is the fact that we didn't have live competition. So now all of a sudden there are a lot more testing that's actually being conducted at these live events. And so, we haven't seen a lot of results in the last couple of years. COVID completely stopped. I don't say completely stopped, but for the most part, stopped the in-competition testing that was happening at the elite level.
Pat, I want to go back to you. Do athletes who pass the drug test, do they get any type of notification from CrossFit that they in fact passed? And what is that whole process like?
So that you guys can hear me now?
I think so. It was a little delay, but I think we're good.
We generally think until their CrossFit has all of the tests that get done, a month or two after the fact, CrossFit to say, hey, we have to give us to publish your result. Well, only test, they don't need your permission, but usually, even whether you did in competition, when you get your results back, I just will revisit kind of what you see.
No, it's still cutting in and out a bit, Pat.
It might not be the internet,
One
though.
more thing.
A lot of people seem to think it's the headphones.
Oh, his AirPods. Do you have
Hmm.
headphones in? Okay, maybe we'll try now. Go ahead, Pat.
Is that any better?
Just a little bit.
Okay, while he's figuring that out, Brian, can you contextualize anything that you've been hearing from athletes thus far, especially because does it leave athletes to sit in limbo if they don't get a notification whether they passed or failed? So are people just kind of waiting on the edge of their seat to see what happens?
Pat, you want to try again?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Good.
Sorry, we just got. What was the last question? I missed it as my.
If athletes get notified if they in fact pass their drug test.
Recently, CrossFit's as transparency, they've started to contact if you have a negative test. They'll have a record of all the tests. Whether I believe if it's a positive test, they don't ask. But just so they can show that they all have a record, like a lot of other sports. Of, 6 times this year on these dates, they'll record, and so we do get contacted one way or another.
Okay, so they do contact you one way or another. So, is there any time that athletes are sitting just waiting for these tests to come out, especially like the final week of semifinals, who their results haven't been made public yet, as we're hearing more and more tests coming out from week 3, for instance?
Okay, also I should maybe correct myself. I think the competition testing, you might be right. Generally, at least in the last few years, either you get paid or or whatever the next step might be in the processing is your green light that you're okay. So if you see more drug testing results too, and that's sort of what becomes the complicating. They don't notify the public because they're still going on and confidentiality. So my biggest issue is, will spots become available for games that will be, they'll only be complications or whatever, because it just took a little bit longer because of appeal process.
Pat, it's still not very good, man.
Yeah, it's cutting in and
Sorry.
out.
I don't know what to do.
All right. Yeah.
He's on
I
an
want to hear
island.
what Pat has to say, but I can only hear every fourth word.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We tried.
All right. We tried, Pat. We'll see you later, man.
It's not frozen.
Oh
I
yeah.
think he's frozen.
Yeah. Here we go. I'll just there.
I can say this on the behalf of what he was saying. I don't think that athletes, like him, who took a drug test at the semifinals, are in a position to earn prize money to advance to the games, are guaranteed to get an email the same way that someone like Nicolas Joyel is, that says you did not fail your drug test. And I think that it could smooth out this process a little bit if they just added that as a protocol. Now, there may be reasons that they don't do that for everyone that we're unaware of, but seeing as they've said nothing about this so far, we're not really sure. If, though, they do send out emails at some point when they have the results from, we'll just use the Atlas Games as an example, and Pat gets an email that says, I'm good to go, that's good for several reasons. First of all, it's clear sailing for him. He's now, right now, athletes from that competition are like, are we waiting for more of them?
Right.
We don't know. Same thing with South America or Asia. It's like, so if you don't get the good to go message, I think what he was trying to say is you could get the deposit in your bank account, and that's like the green light. But in a case of someone like Austin Spencer, where he's not eligible to receive money because he didn't place in the top 5, obviously he would eventually become eligible for that. Just why not send an email out to the athletes individually that says you either did or did not pass your drug test? One of the problems on our end in that regard is with all these drug failures, particularly that have been happening in South America, is that we've been getting conflicting information where someone will contact me and say, hey, there's another one. This person failed their drug test. And so I'll then reach out to, a variety of people to try to confirm that. And I'll get a 50-50 split. I mean, this happened to me yesterday with one of the women that qualified from there, where I was getting multiple reports that she failed the drug test and was notified by CrossFit, and multiple reports that she hadn't heard anything from CrossFit yet. Whereas if CrossFit sent out an email to everyone who was tested that either says you're good to go or you're not, then it would be very easy for us to just ask her, her coach or agent or someone that's close to her, and she could say, yep, we got the email, we're good to go, or yeah, we got the email and it's bad news.
So then at this point, we haven't really heard anything at all from CrossFit. All of these cases, at least I'm pretty sure all of them, when we're talking about those who have tested positive from semifinals, they've been the ones to come forward, take to social media, what have you, to announce, hey, I got an email from CrossFit. This is what happened. Justin, can you give us an idea of what is the process for CrossFit's communication, and why at this point haven't we heard anything?
So there's two things to keep in mind. One is to answer your question directly and immediately. It is usually been the protocol of CrossFit to stay silent until the appeals process is over. In almost every circumstance, though not every single one, the athlete requests their B sample, and it makes sense to do that since if you've had a positive test. Why not test the B sample unless you're just going to admit to it? And there's been instances recently where that's been the case. But what usually happens is the athlete's notified, you've been tested, you've tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug, and you can get a packet of information delivered to you, and then you can actually request the B sample to be tested. So CrossFit usually in the past has not released any information until the B sample was tested, and essentially the appeals process has been concluded. And then CrossFit makes an announcement, sometimes in bulk, like with a couple of them, or they do it on one athlete announcement by itself. Just depends on the circumstances. So usually they don't say anything until the B sample is concluded. And that's really one of the main reasons why things are silent. You're also dealing with drug tests. You're also dealing with medical information. So the protocols are going to be a little bit more tight in this instance. Now, CrossFit does have an drug testing policy book that they can release the information sooner for under their own discretion, and presumably the interpretation would be that they wanted to be able to notify an athlete that they're potentially going to get invited, so would give them the latitude to be able to make that kind of declaration. Or if I'm not mistaken, I have to go back and look at this, but if I'm not mistaken, if the athlete reports it themselves, or another media outlet like us reports information via that athlete, then it sort of allows CrossFit to come in and make any statement it wants to at that point. So why haven't we heard anything? Well, presumably because they're adhering to their policy of not saying anything. But we're not necessarily asking CrossFit to reveal the names of individuals who are testing positive. I think we're trying to get clarity in the situation. I think we're trying to get a better understanding of the protocols, the procedures, the situation. That's, I think, what the general public, with the competing public, the general public, the fans, stakeholders alike, media are asking for is, hey guys, when are you going to stand up and say something? Not when are you going to reveal a list of other names that haven't already been revealed by us or by athletes themselves. We're now at 14 athletes, a lot of which have happened from the semifinals, and we just found our first. I think we concluded week 3, right? With the announcement that came out earlier today. Patrick Clark wrote. Nasser.
Brian was saying no, we have not.
No, I'm just saying there's really no way to know, because there's not a consistency. It's not like everyone that failed a drug test at South America was notified at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. They're kind of rolling in that regard. And you talked a little bit yesterday about the process of batch testing at some of these facilities. So if they have 12 tests from whatever semifinal, I don't think there's a guarantee that they're testing all of them in the same batch at the facility, because
no, there isn't.
And therefore, you and I who've competed at the same event, you might get an email one day and I might get an email 3 days later, which is, that's just how it seems to be. So the fact that we're getting, we got information about, for example, Mike Catras, who competed in week 4, well before we had any information about Phil Toon or Nasser El Ruaye, who both competed in week 3.
So at this point, are we expecting to see more positive drug tests?
Yeah, I mean, based on the things I've heard, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But again, right now, because of the state that things are in, there's just a lot of conflicting information out there. So I have heard that there are other people that may be getting drug sanctions, but I certainly can't say for sure. And because, kind of the expectation now is that if we're going to hear it, it's going to be from the athlete. CrossFit's obviously waiting for something before they want to release that.
But do we think that the CrossFit should just release some kind of statement? I mean, everybody in the community is talking about it, whether it's the athletes taking to social media, whether it's the comment section on anything we post or other people out there. It's just,
I mean, I would say for sure they should say something. And the main reason why is because the most disheartening messages that I've been getting as a response of all of this are, that the sport sucks, that everyone's dirty, and that CrossFit has no idea what they're doing. And, I don't think that those things are all true, but that's a perception that's being created right now.
Yeah.
And for the governing body or organization to not think that that's an important time to get behind a podium or in front of a camera and make a statement on behalf of the athletes that have tested clean, or on behalf of the process, or on behalf of themselves, is a little questionable to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, as far as controlling the narrative, if you're a corporation, you want to be in control of the narrative. They're very much not, and they are. We've known this for a long time. They've always been reticent to share information. They've been slow to share information, or just not share any information at all. And this is another instance where I think, again, we talked about leadership last night. Like, who's going to stand up and is going to say, "Hey, we recognize we've got a problem. We're going to make a concerted effort to fix it." And if that requires them to get on a town hall every single day, then I think they have the resources to be able to do that. They just got to nominate somebody who's going to actually take over that job and is going to say, you know what, for the next 12 months, I'm going to make my mission to clean up the sport, to provide clarity, provide consistency, to ensure that there's fair play across all competitions, and that we have a consistent testing process and protocols that are communicated to the general public. I think that they've been vague about what they do and why they do it. And they've communicated this to me several times. I've had calls and conversations with JB. I've had calls with their head of communications, Andrew Weinstein, and he's said the same thing to me. Both of them have echoed this, that we don't signal when and how we're going to test because it allows for there to be cheaters. It allows for them to have a heads up. And it's kind of like everybody knows you test the whole podium. It's in the rule book. So what are you really trying to get away from here? And it's almost kind of I get the answer, and I don't know why they hold to that line. I wish that they would articulate their policy and stick to it, because we are seeing inconsistencies, inconsistent ways of communicating it. Sometimes they make an announcement, sometimes they don't make an announcement. It's just hard.
Well, it certainly doesn't seem like they're feeling pressure from the community the way that we're feeling the pressure. We're seeing the pressure. I just want to pull up some of the posts that we're seeing. Marquand Jones, he took to his social media. We had other athletes. We had, especially this one I thought was really noteworthy, a message from illegal substances from RP co-owner Phil Mansfield. He put a post pretty much saying that they want to be part of the solution. Brian, what are your thoughts when you see other people in the space putting out such strong feelings about dealing with this, but then we don't hear from CrossFit?
Well, there have been a lot of times that people have put forth, ideas or potential solutions, or just maybe initial thoughts to get the ball rolling on these conversations. And I think that CrossFit is turning a corner a little bit in this regard. I think that for a long time, they were very much turned off to the idea of taking input from the outside world, no matter how good the intentions were. It seems like this year, Justin Berg has spoken about this a couple of times, throughout semifinals when he was on broadcasts and at some of the press conferences that they've held, that they are actually reaching out to certain groups of people, primarily different groups of athletes and athlete representatives, to try to get some feedback about ways that they could potentially improve or streamline the season that would be more well received on their end. So maybe this is another realm where they would potentially be open to having some conversations with certain people. But I think that, there should be a certain amount of caution in terms of expectation there as well, because it is something that's a relatively new endeavor that they're, taking interest in, which is to take potentially some ideas from the people outside of the CrossFit HQ space.
So something else that was part of the conversation yesterday, but Brian, I think you posted something about it today, is the conversation with backfills and how athletes are being invited before CrossFit has even made a public statement. Is this normally how it goes?
Well, I mean, from what I can tell, there is no norm in this regard this year. There have been situations where the athletes, the athlete has announced that they failed a drug test, and then a certain amount of time has passed later, and another athlete says, I got my invite to the CrossFit Games. That's what happened with the Nicholas Joyelle, Austin Spencer case, and I think there was maybe a 4 to 5 day period of time in between then. And so, someone like Austin Spencer, he's, working with the Misfit. They're very experienced in this regard. As soon as they saw that Joyelle failed that drug test, they may have reached out to CrossFit and asked, but probably they just, were like, hey, man, we gotta get ready just in case, which is really all that they can do either way. And then they waited until they heard from CrossFit. Austin got his invite. He explained that this morning on Sevan's podcast, if anyone missed that. And then, he posted on Instagram. But we have different situations where, for example, in the case of Nasser, the first confirmation that we had from any athlete that something might be amiss there was Arthur Semenov, who was the third place finisher in the Far East Throwdown. And he said, and he posted a screenshot of the invitation that he got saying he'd earned an invite to the CrossFit Games prior to Nasser saying anything publicly. And of course, CrossFit still has not said anything in that regard. So the order of operations was not only different there, but the timeline between Arthur receiving his invite and Nasser announcing his whatever he announced on his social media was not 4 to 5 day gap like it was in the case of Austin Spencer. So I think, there's a huge range of possibilities here. And then, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen in the case of South America. I think Augustine Riquelme went on Instagram Live maybe an hour ago and said he has heard nothing from CrossFit yet. And obviously Pedro Martins has already, confronted his community and said that he just did receive an email saying a negative drug test. And we're all waiting to see what's going to happen with regards to the team situation there. So there's lots of different scenarios that have already played out that make it really hard for us to say what to expect in these situations if any more of them arise.
Yeah, and also
look at
sorry,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to
Lauren.
pull up this post. When you look at this post, Brian, that you put on your Instagram story, it shows athletes that we've already reported on that have positive drug tests. Then their backfills are also there, and this is all on the game's leaderboard. So is this just a chain of command issue when it comes to communication, a due process? What is it?
Now that I'm looking at this, that top arrow should be green and the bottom one should all be red. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just noted, I would think that is once you've notified an athlete that they failed their drug test and they're no longer eligible of the season, like my next order of operations as the person managing the games system would be remove them from anything associated with the game system, because people are going there for a resource, for information, to prepare for the games in a variety of different capacities. And right now it's got conflicting or inaccurate information on it.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Brian just said, I mean, CrossFit yesterday posted to their Instagram account, talking about the qualifiers out of Brazil, and it included individuals who had already declared that they had tested positive. And you look at that and you go, well, look, providing credible, relevant, accurate information is a basic standard that you as a governing body need to do. And it's sort of, you look at that and we're saying, well, these athletes have self-declared that they've tested positive. They're no longer going to be going to the CrossFit Games. CrossFit's publishing team publishes content that involves a team that's qualified, that's no longer qualified. And you go, wait, do they not know what's going on? Are they unaware of this? And it also adds to confusion. It also adds to misinformation. This is a fundamental problem. And we're working, it's very challenging for us to even follow this. And we are, we're working literally around the clock. Lauren, I know you were up till 2 your time. I was up till almost 1 my time. Just getting back to the blocking and tackling of the regular day as this stuff is moving quickly, and we're having conversations globally across multiple time zones. But this is a company worth multiple hundreds of billions of dollars, and they can't get their own publishing right. And you wonder why everyone's throwing their hands up in the air and saying, I have no idea what's going on. It doesn't look like they do either.
So we have had some athletes take to social media and say that this is a bigger problem outside of the top 10, but we don't hear about it because generally CrossFit doesn't test outside of the top 10. What are your thoughts on that? Is this a bigger problem than we're actually seeing right now?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things that Phil mentioned, the guy from Red Pill, whose Instagram you pulled up earlier, and he was using some data, and I'm not sure where he necessarily gets this data from, that 1 in 6 male CrossFitters, 1 in 8 female CrossFitters, he suspects, or maybe based on some kind of studies. He's been around for a long time in this sport. So those are, substantial numbers. And then he's suggesting it could even be twice as many as that. So I don't know what he's basing that off of. And then, he brought up Marquand Jones. He suggested that a lot of athletes would be comfortable paying more money for registration fees if it ensured that more people, in his case, he wants everyone to be tested so that we can, eradicate this problem altogether. And even though Vellner had difficulties, he did text us, and he, one of the things that he said in his texts, apart from sorry that was going on, is that this is not necessarily a bad thing that there are a lot of drug test failures. If it's a step in the right direction in terms of eradicating that from the sport, then you can obviously see where this could potentially be a positive.
Well, it also shows it's working too, to be fair, Brian and Lauren. It shows it's working. So like if the idea that CrossFit's somehow doing something wrong here on the testing front isn't necessarily a narrative that's wholly accurate. Their tests are being conducted. They are catching bad actors, whether they're intentional or unintentional isn't the point. There are drugs in their system, and that needs to get caught, and that needs to be identified. And if we're having 14 tests, and if positive tests, and if it ends up being higher than that, well, frankly, that is technically a good thing. Now, it's bad that there are so many, but it's good that they're catching. And one of the things that I wrote a story a long time ago, pre-pandemic, when I had an opportunity to go and observe a B sample test in the UCLA laboratory, and I learned a lot through that process. I also sat down with Justin Berg, who's the general manager of sport now, and he was the general manager of the CrossFit Games back then. And he was able to illuminate a lot of things for me during that process. And one of the things that he was talking about was the adapting environment of the drug testing environment, and what they're able to catch and what they're able to detect, and how it evolves year over year over year. And that was something that was very interesting. I was learning a lot at that stage of the game. Didn't know nearly as much about drug testing then as I do now. And it's also possible that the tests are getting more sensitive. And I know that they have had the ability to go back and retest things from previous Olympics. And this has happened in Olympic weightlifting, where they didn't catch anything at the time, but the tests have become more sophisticated. And they've taken those samples and they've retested them based off of information that they felt was credible enough to say, I think something was going on, so we're going to go ahead and retest a lot of these things. And then they went in and caught issues, and they actually changed some of the podium for the men's Olympic weightlifting. And so tests are becoming more sensitive, and they are having the ability to catch bad actors and test it, detect things further back. Now, I don't know much more about the science of that, but if this is what's happening, and that's why there's an influx, that is a good thing. And that is actually something that I think has been lost in this conversation, is that testing, is that revealing more positive tests is a bad trend, but it's a good trend if we're catching more athletes who have stuff in their system that they should have.
So historically, is CrossFit actually testing more athletes? Is that what we're seeing between last year and then right now? Do we have any kind of
You have to take the pandemic out of that,
trend?
because the pandemic shifted that, because there were very few live competitions and very few, all online. So take that out of it. It's hard to know that answer, because CrossFit doesn't actually reveal how many people are tested. So we don't really know that. Now, I don't know the rules and the legality here. I'm not entirely sure what they're allowed to reveal or not reveal. Do we know what weightlifting
does? Like, can you see that somewhere? Or is there public record?
I don't know. I don't. Brian, you know?
I'm not trying to catch anybody off guard. I'm just genuinely curious.
I don't know the answer.
Anybody knows, put it in the comments.
Trey, I would to answer the question. I don't know the answer. My initial reaction would be that whatever's legally allowed, I would advocate for the highest level of transparency possible. I think that we need to swing the pendulum wide towards maybe being oversharing at this stage of the game rather than undersharing. It should be illegal. It should be the appropriate level of disclosure. I'm not familiar with what the legal requirements are here. But if there was a way to reveal that, I think it should be revealed. I think it should be obvious and it should be very clear and it should be done in a very organized and consistent fashion. And that way we could establish trends. We could identify how many more people are being tested. I think there are more tests going because they're testing further down the leaderboard. In a structured test, they are conducting further down the leaderboard. As we noted yesterday in the live show, or in the show last night, they're obviously testing the top 5 that are advancing from North America, for example, and then they're going 6, 7, and 8. So that's 8 per gender. So that's a total of 16 athletes per competition on the individual side alone. So yeah, I think they are testing more. So
and then it should be 14 total team members because they're testing down to 7 and they test one male and one female in each team.
Okay, so that's 40 athletes.
Why don't they test everyone at the games or at semifinals?
Well, we obviously know that a lot of it comes down to finances. This isn't cheap. We're still trying to figure out how to professionalize the sport and pay many of the athletes. So finding a separate fund to then test all of these athletes, I get that it becomes challenging, but I'm just curious if there is a solution that isn't going to break the bank, but still legitimate, still make it a legitimate competition where there's no question, no doubt in anybody's mind that these athletes are clean. Is there a way to do that?
At least for the games, they've been in the past, at least last year, they were paid out to 20 spots. I don't think they tested down to 20 spots. This year, they've adjusted their pay scale to pay out all 40 spots. And I would be shocked if there's a plan to test all 40 male and female athletes at the games. So it's a valid question and a valid concern that they're obviously testing the people at the top where the prize money is the biggest, but there's definitely the possibility of someone in the middle to the bottom getting by in that regard unless they change that procedure.
If athletes are getting paid, it seems like a moral conflict to not be able to prove if they're clean or not.
And we don't know how many are tested at the games. And we don't even have enough direct access to athletes in order to chase down and ask everybody who has been tested. And so without CrossFit disclosing it, it's unfortunately just not something that we're going to be able to track down. We've had some efforts to try to do that in the past, but again, getting direct access to all 80 athletes, 40 men and 40 women, is extremely challenging, not only during the games environment, but after the games. And most of them don't answer their emails, and DMs is, we just don't know. My anecdotal.
Not everyone responds to your DMs as much as they do to Lauren's.
It's true. It's true.
Mine might be a little more flooded than Justin's.
I have a very anemic social media presence as I'm dedicated to the task at hand here and the day-to-day operations of making sure you guys are successful. And I'm thoroughly involved in all of that and not my own social media personality, which is lame. Anyways.
Okay, so when we're looking at drugs in CrossFit and all of these positive tests, do either of you know, is this in par with what we're seeing in bigger sports, other sports, especially when we have this conversation that we want it to be a professionalized sport? So is this showing that maybe we are, that may be a jump, but somewhat on par with the bigger sports?
There's more drug failures, so we're doing something right? Is that moving in the right direction?
Not necessarily, but just people maybe are treating it the same way as another professional sport where you do see more drug tests, positive drug tests in, the NFL or baseball, things like that.
You don't see a lot of them annually. There's a lot at stake for testing positive in any sport. Come to think of it, I don't track that. That's kind of one of those more obscure news releases sort of things. But I don't see a lot of them happening in basketball and football. I I think UFC, there's a spat of recent ones 6 or 7 months ago that happened. There just isn't really a lot of data. You'd have to track this independently, which I think makes it very challenging to benchmark it. But 14 for a year for a season that's global, is that high or low? I don't know in comparison to other major sports. I would say it's probably similar to maybe the lower rungs of the UFC or of MMA, possibly, but I just don't know.
So where do we go from here? What are we waiting for? Specifically, are we waiting for CrossFit to say something? Are we waiting for testing to change? What
I'm
is
definitely
it?
waiting on CrossFit to say something, though it's unclear whether they're going to issue any kind of statement talking about this issue. It is an issue. This is an issue that CrossFit has had for many years. This looks like the high watermark so far. And I think CrossFit should address how they plan to handle it going forward. The inconsistencies in South Africa, I think they need to address those and the reasons why those decisions were made. And I think they need to issue a very clear policy for how testing is going to go for next season. But they haven't in the past been willing to come up with big ideas like that and overhaul and make changes like that. So my expectation is relatively low. But yeah, I think the world is waiting for CrossFit to stand up and say something.
I don't know that. I actually don't know that the number of drug failures this year is that much different than years past. I think that there were 17 coming out of the regionals in 2018 between teams and individuals, but the media was completely controlled by CrossFit still at that time. Now the media landscape is entirely different. Instagram has grown a lot in the last 4 years, and all of these, athletes, managers, agents, sponsors, whatever, they have the opportunity to share this information. And, people in the media surrounding CrossFit have been very, very proactive this year in terms of diving into topics and subjects that are potentially controversial a lot more quickly and aggressively. So even if the numbers are similar, it feels like it's a lot worse. And on the back of a lot of the other mistakes that have been made throughout the course of this competition season, it just amplifies the kind of negative feel surrounding this.
Justin, what's your bottom line?
I don't think it's all too dissimilar from it was yesterday. I think they have a problem on their hands, and I think this continues to add to a bad narrative that they are not in control of their own sport. I think that the inconsistencies that we've seen, the decision-making process that's convoluted, and I think this continues to add on to it. I think if there's another athlete tomorrow or another athlete the next day, it's piling on and piling on and piling on. And without a lot of direct communication from CrossFit, it's really hard to understand what they're planning to do about it. And if there's one area where they can improve and immediately improve, and it would not be hard to do so, would be to start talking and to be open and to increase those lines of communication directly. Don't pay lip service to it. Don't say, hey, we're going to work on it. I think everyone's pretty tired of hearing that line from the top brass of CrossFit is, yeah, we know we need to do it and we're going to work on it, make a concerted effort to reach out to athlete groups. Who are the athlete groups? We have no idea. Stakeholders, industry leaders, whatever. Those are platitudes that you throw out, on YouTube Live. Give us something real, seriously. And I think they just need to start communicating like that. My bottom line is open your mouth.
Brian, what's your bottom line?
I don't think that the drug use in sport is going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think in particular here, the thing that needs to improve is just the process surrounding that. So I think we need to have a more clear expectation of who is receiving what information from CrossFit when, and what's the order of operations surrounding that for everyone that's involved, and particularly within the context of the timeline between semifinals and the games, so that the athletes that do test clean, that do ultimately end up competing there, have the best chance to get there and get there, the thing that I always try to illuminate here is I don't just want to see the best athletes at the games. I also want to see the best athletes at the games that have had ample time to prepare to give their best once they get there.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to that's not possible. I mean, you cannot tell me that, Lazar Jukic, who qualified for the CrossFit Games on May 22nd, and Austin Spencer, who found out that he made the games today, are going to be just as prepared to give their best when the CrossFit Games start on August 3rd.
Yeah.
All right. It's
Good point.
What day is it? It's Tuesday, July 12th, 4:11 p.m. Eastern time. 14 positive drug tests thus far from semifinals. Still waiting on CrossFit to come forward. We are expecting them to release a statement. We just don't have an ETA at this point, but we will be sure to inform you guys once that happens. Until then, Justin, Brian, thank you guys again for continuing this conversation, and everybody in the comment section, thanks for watching.